Hey guys, my name's Terry and I'm a collectibles dealer. I specialize in high-end collections. I'm a big fan of music, but I'm not an expert. That's why we've got Johnny D.
Word up, Funk Master Flex. Big shout to my man Johnny D. You know how we do, Johnny.
Johnny D, ready to dive right back into it?
I'm all ready, but before we even touch anything, I just want to tell you, I've been hearing from a lot of my friends that there's this Billy Joel documentary on HBO Max. It's 5 parts, and I heard it was deep, and I watched the first 2, which were crazy. I don't know if you're a Billy guy. I mean, I love Billy.
Sure.
I just figured, just to as an appetizer, Innocent Man is one of his biggest albums, and it goes through this whole thing being married to Christy Brinkley and everything. So I have the acetate of An Innocent Man. The beauty of this one was once in a while Sterling would give you the box, which was great. And this is a crazy piece, and it's wild because the way I backdoored into that piece, it was, over the years I've been real blessed with people coming to me saying, hey, I know somebody who has assets, whatever. And I forgot who it was, but somebody put me in touch with this guy. It was like the engineer. And Phil Ramone, who produced this and was one of the biggest producers in the history of music, he did all of Billy's stuff. He worked for Phil. But the crazy part of the whole thing was, so I grabbed all his Billy Joel ass tapes, which was nuts, and they were all brand new. But the crazy part was my connection with Chicago and the Bucketheads. He also did the Street Player album, which was produced by Phil Ramone, and I got my ass
No
from
way.
him. So, and it was a different take. There was a 10-inch with a different take. So that was crazy. So the Billy Joel thing, I'll always have that like weird this, but yeah, I watched it 2 nights ago, and I says I have the assay, so I just let me dig it up real quick. So yeah, this is a piece and a half, man. I mean, you look what's on that Easy Money that was in the soundtrack with Rodney Dangerfield, Innocent Man, Longest Time, Tell Her About It. These are bombs. This is arguably as big. I mean, 50 Second Street and Glass House is big, but this is arguably his most popular album. Uptown Girl, Christy Lee, Leave a Tender Moment Alone, Keeping the Faith. I mean, that's like
incredible.
A greatest hits album. It's like a greatest hits album.
And what on an album like that, what would you think the population of that is? You think there were 2 made, 1 made, 3 made?
I would think 1 in a case like this. I mean, I don't know if Billy was that much into going home with his record player and stuff. And the funny thing is watching the actual the special on HBO, he was kind of disconnected from a lot of stuff because he was getting backlash when he did this album, and they were saying he was trying to be a chameleon and copy other people's things. So it was this particular album, I don't think he would have even listened to it. It's kind of a weird thing, but I don't think that, I mean, we could say 3, but yeah. And then the box, I mean, when you see the box is old. That's like, the box, they put the sticker on it, Billy Joel, CBS, with the date. I always had a crazy soft spot for the boxes. You don't see a lot of those.
Yeah, the box and the sticker is really nice.
The box and the sticker is great. I do have, a bunch of them from Sterling. Sterling was like the only one who did those of all the master people. Anyway, I didn't want to disrupt. I thought that was kind of. I mean, how many people could be doing a podcast and just whip out an Innocent
That's
Man
incredible, and I love how you tie it into the series on Netflix. I mean, it's
HBO Max. Yes.
Okay, well, look, that actually feeds right into where I want to start. I was going to ask you, being in New York City, was there one record store that was kind of like your home base? Did you go to all of them? Was it equal opportunity? And if you could tell us a little bit of history about the record stores in New York City, I'd really love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, Vinyl Mania on Carmine Street was hands down that was literally, some people called it church. I called it a second home. I mean, this was a place where there was more activity going on in that place on a Friday and Saturday night than most clubs. But before I even get into Vinyl Mania, there was kind of a progression. I always look at it like, people say, you start off on the penny slots and then you go to nickel, you go to the quarter, then all of a sudden you're doing dollar slots. Now you're at the roulette thing, you're mortgaging your house. It's like it was, I think with the record stores as a young person, I was only able to go, in my area. And back in the 70s, I had told you a while ago, I mean, you'd go to the corner store that the guy that was the locksmith, you'd walk in, there'd be a hardware store, and to the left, there'd be 100 cubbies. And in the cubbies, he'd have little, maybe 5, 10 copies of each record, and then he'd have a sheet, the Hot 100 Billboard. You'd say, I want number four, and he'd pull it out, 45 cents. So records were all around. What was happening when I became a DJ in 79, 1980, the 12-inch single came in existence. For those who don't know what a 12-inch single is, so there was the 7-inch 45, which was the most popular. And then because the DJ culture was growing and the club culture was growing, the companies realized we need to get these records and extend them for the dance floor. So you couldn't do it on a 7-inch because the longer you'd go, they'd start crackly and you lose a lot of quality. So they came out with the 12-inch single, which was, it could be a 3-minute record. Now it's 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes long on one side. A lot of them were one-sided. Some of them were two-sided. And most were promo only. So they were promotional. So they were very rare. They were only given to DJs and they were just impossible. Then record companies realized there's a value in these and they started to sell them. So then you go to a record store, they'd have a 12-inch single section. So starting out going to Corvettes and a lot of, regular stores that had a record section, now there was specialty record stores. So in Manhattan at the time, I remember going to J&R Music World, which was on Park Row, and that was incredible because they had all kinds of equipment and everything. And you walked up the stairs and you got to this little corner where it was only 12 inches. It was a 12-inch room, which was insane. So that was the place, but there were no promos. It was all sealed commercial copies. Right next to it was a place called Bondi's. Bondi's was selling a lot of stuff, but they had a little import section, which was like, oh shit, like what was an import? But what happened was a lot of companies in America, if they were doing a promo only 12-inch, most people couldn't get them. The UK or Germany would say, we're going to make a 12-inch commercially available. They would flood America. So now me, instead of spending $2.99 for a 12-inch, I have to spend $4.99 for the import. And that became a thing. And Bondi's was known for the imports. Couple of blocks away from that on Word Street was Downtown Records, which was, that place really opened me up because it was this guy, Frank Ramos, Latin guy. He just passed away a couple of years ago. Very influential guy in the disco New York scene. And I was very close with him and I would go there a lot. But getting back to the Vinyl Mania thing, so at this time I had discussed on one of the last podcasts we did, there were a lot of DJs in the neighborhood. Everybody was a DJ. Like you literally, there'd be 3, 4 on a block, and we'd all get together and talk. And everybody, I always say it all comes down to ego because it all does. And we're having a conversation one night, and this guy Russell, who's an older guy, he was probably 7, 8 years older than me, and he just in passing said, "Oh yeah, Vinyl Mania on Carmine Street." So I was like, and nobody seems to be paying attention. Nobody asking the question. So in the back of my head, I says, when I go home, I have to try to figure out how to get to Carmine Street. And I knew how to get to the village. I'm like, I have to figure it out. The next day I got on the train. I got off on West 4th Street. I'm walking to Carmine Street, and on 6th Avenue, a block away, there was a Triangle Park. And there was a guy in there with records taking up the entire triangle. It was like you walked in, there were crates all around the perimeter. So I'm like, this is insane. But the first thing, because I'm a lunatic, I'm saying, what happens if it rains? Like my brain instantly went to like, how's this guy gonna pack all this stuff up if we just get a storm? I don't know. And I'm thinking, could this be Vinyl Mania? Like this is a little bit odd. Like it's just in the street. And I realized, okay, I was on 6, so I saw Carmine Street. I said, so I was with that guy for a little while. I walked in, and then 30 Carmine Street, there was a little store, and right next to it, 32 Carmine, and so Vinyl Mania had two. So the first one was like a lot of rock stuff and Beatles and picture sleeves and stuff. So I walk into the right one, and I look up, and he had a wire, which I had never seen before. And what the wire became very famous, and he was the guy who originated this. What he would do in the store is he would get these rare records, these promo only 12 inches, and he put them on the wire for $50. $50 in 1980, 81 was astronomical when a 12-inch was going for 299. So I walk in and I meet Charlie. It was him, his wife, a couple of people behind the counter, and I asked him for a couple of records. He goes, "Yeah, look, look in that bin, look on it." And I just knew at that moment I would never have money for drugs. I was like, I will never do a drug. I will never have money. Every dollar I ever get is going to be because I said, even if this is the only place I come to. It's just promos, picture disc, colored vinyl. I could not believe what he crammed in this store. It was two tiny stores. He went on to go to 52 Carmine down the block. Then he went to 60 Carmine, which was his final store. He had a place uptown. He had a place across the street with rock stuff. He had a place on like Hudson Street, which was more of a gay, high energy thing. But Charlie was the hands down, that was the place. That place changed my life. And as I got older, I stayed very close with him. I got into the music business, and I got to a point where, I was sending him records. And I used to have my assistant at Atlantic Records. At any given time, there were 10 labels that said Charlie Grappone, 60 Carmine Street, New York, 10014, whatever it was. And just all day long, I was getting so much music from other places. Box these up for Charlie. I was just sending Charlie thousands of records, just sending them. The crazy part was I got to a point where my whole life was like, wow, you just to go into Vinyl Mania and just take whatever you want. And I got to that point where I would go there and he'd be like, just take whatever you want. And I would always go to the classic bands. I really wasn't concerned much about the newer stuff. And I got to a point where I was like, I have everything. It was like, I remember pulling him over. We went for dinner afterwards. I said, who would ever think I'd get to a point where I'm not taking records? Like, it was so crazy that, it's like a kid in the candy store. Somebody's like, hey, go in there, take whatever you want. And you're like, you just, so it was crazy to see how it went from, it was the most incredible. I mean, still, it was always incredible, but, my interests and life changes as you get older. And I basically had almost everything I wanted. I will add, during all of my relationship with Charlie Grappone, he never really saw a value in test pressings and acetates. And Charlie Grappone, hands down, saw more records than any other retailer because he was very in the know. He was very open. Oh, Italo disco is big. That was a genre that was happening. He would buy an unbelievable amount of it. Most stores didn't have the kind of cash that he did to up, oh, I'll take 100 copies. People were taking 3, 4 copies. And then when you sell out to try to reorder them, by the time you get them and they come back into the States, the record's over, people move on, stores wind up sitting with them. He was kind of smart enough to buy quantity and always be ahead of it. So he was also known, oh, this DJ passed away. Who's going to buy his records back? Vinyl Mania. Oh, this guy works for the New York Times. He's a music editor. He doesn't really care about disco, but he's getting all these 12-inch singles. He doesn't know what the hell they are. Vinyl Mania will buy them. So Charlie had the reputation for taking everything. So everything came through his door. So he used to leave a box on the side for me of tests and acetates. And I would go there and he always would take care of me with those over the years, which was phenomenal.
It sounds like you developed a really close relationship with him, and he was kind of one of these guys who was looking out for you. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're still to this day, we're extremely close. We're gonna have a surprise podcast coming up soon with him. But yeah, Charlie is he's a very dear friend of mine, still music intensive, very organized. I'm organized. Like we always love that about each other. At one point I was working with him in the 90s when I got my first job in the music business. I was working Monday through Friday and Sundays. I was like, I want to work at Vinyl Mania, just to say, because I've never, all the years I said I had all these horrible jobs, bagel store, working at my uncle's, catering, all these. Why didn't I ever work in a record store? I was like, so it was a no-brainer for me because I was always helping. People would come into Vinyl Mania. I was like a worker. Helping people, you should have this, take this, listen to this record. So I was constantly, and Vinyl Mania was that. That was the difference between that place and every other store. You'd get there with other DJs, and not only would you make friends with them, but you would help people would come in. Oh, what's this? What's hot? What's the new whatever? What's the hot import? And people were it was a community there. And I mean, Friday nights, it was like a club there. You'd go in there, there'd be, it was packed, it was mobbed. And it was it was it was better than being in a club a lot of the time. I remember like I'd leave there on a Friday night, 9 o'clock, go home, take a shower, get to my club 10, 11 o'clock. And you were like, wow, I had almost a better experience at Vinyl Mania before we got to the club, just playing music, because Charlie was also a guy who he had started a counter person, which wasn't really done before. So he had this guy, Manny Lehman, behind the counter playing records. So Manny he was the captain. He was steering that whole situation. So he'd play a record, and obviously he knew his music, so he could read the room. And at that time, the beauty of Vinylmania was, I always say, hey, you have all these people that have the gay, black, white, everybody has an issue, whatever. Vinylmania, when you walked in that door, there was none of that shit. You could be the gayest guy, blackest guy, white, nobody cared. It was about the music. And that was a beauty of that whole thing. I had done a Larry Levan compilation called Journey into Paradise, the Larry Levan story. The Paradise Garage was around the corner from Vinyl Mania. So Charlie was very close with Larry. Manny Lehman was extremely close. When I did the compilation, I put Manny on with me and we did it together. We put the track list together. I had him do the line notes. I had never been to the Paradise Garage, and I'm the only white person who admits that I haven't been there. Everybody else seems to say they were there. Meanwhile, none of them. I think 90% of the people who say they were there weren't there. But I was smart enough to know that it was important and it had to be done the right way. And what I always said about Vinyl Mania, which was really, really important, was Manny Lehman behind the counter was the guy feeding Larry Levan records. And then Manny was also the guy feeding a guy like me records Larry was playing. So he was in this position to break so much music because now I take records he's turning me on to. I go at a club for 3, 4, 500 people. How many DJs are in there doing the same thing? So the spread of music and breaking records and stuff, it was a beautiful, and it was all being done without anybody paying attention to it. Now I can see it's so clear, 40 years later. But when you were in the middle of it, very few people ever acknowledge how powerful that whole process was.
When you're collecting, it's so important to have other collectors to, talk things out with, kind of the camaraderie. Where obviously Charlie was helping you build your collection by putting records aside, acetates and test presses specifically for you.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you were one of the only guys who wanted them, so that kind of
Yes.
helps. But were there other guys besides Charlie who you would consider people who made your collection possible? Who were very, very, helpful in getting your collection to where it is today.
Yes, I think I met a lot of people, through Charlie and Mania, but there was a Downtown Ramos that I mentioned, Downtown Records with Frank Ramos on Word Street. He was a very he was good to me. He and me and my friend Sal used to go, and he used to always take care of us. So he was a good source, and he would give me. There was a rare promo that he only had a box of 30 and or 20. At the time there was a box of 25. He would always put them on the side when I went there because when the record was hot, they would sell out. You go there on a Saturday, if you're there after 12 o'clock, all the stuff you want was gone. So you needed that for Saturday night. So he'd have stuff on the side for me. There was a guy named Leroy Washington that I'm sure we're going to speak about a lot over all of the shows that we do. He was the DJ at Studio 54, and he to me was unbelievably influential. He opened up a record store on Bleecker Street in the Village, and it was called High Tech, and it was a very strange spot because he had high-end equipment in there, and he tried to do the thing like Charlie with the wire, putting records up for $40 and $50, but he didn't have a lot of records. But it was a beautiful place. It had like a spiral staircase going up to this like little lofty area, and there were records. You never saw a lot of people in the place. Two of the people behind the counter were kind of a little snobbish, but the one guy in there that I got very close with was this guy named Joe Warren. And Joe, he was a great guy, music guy, and he knew I loved test pressings and acetates. And one day I went in there and he said to me, he goes, I got something for you. And it was Inner Life. It was a disco record, Moment in Life, with this person, Jocelyn Brown, which was a very big record in the dance world. And Shep Pettibone, who was like one of my idols, had done the remix of it, and he gave me the acetate. I was like, oh wow, like that, like blew my mind. And during that time, the turntables that people were really looking for were called the Thorns TD 125 MK2. I think they're the worst turntables in the world, but Larry Levan had them. Studio 54 had them. They swore that they would have. I thought they. I'm a Techniques guy. I have over 50 Techniques turntables. I never liked the Thorns. Anyway, my sister's godfather is a chemist, one of my father's best friend, and he had all kinds of money, and he lived Gramercy Park, a beautiful apartment. So one day, I'm getting old or whatever, and he says, John, I have this turntable. I know you DJ. I don't know if you care about it. And I look at it, fucking Thorns TD 125 MK2, immaculate with the plastic coated pages from Germany of the manual. So I'm like. So I get the thing, I bring it home. I'm like, I mean, what are the chances? This thing at the time was going for over $1,000. So I look at it and I plug it in. I said, this isn't for me. This guy Joe at High Tech was like, I knew he was, and he didn't have money. He was from Newark. He was just a good guy. So when I go in to see him and I have my car parked outside, so I said to him, I said, Joe, go in the car. I got something in the back seat for you. So he goes out and he opens up and he's like looking, he's not thinking that this turntable's for him. So he's thinking I'm leaving him records. So he goes, what do you want? I says, that the back seat, that's yours. So he's looking at me and the guy, like, he starts crying. He was like, he goes, I said, yo, that means a lot more to you than it means to me. It's immaculate, blah, blah. Great. Fast forward. This is how crazy things are. December 15th, my mother's birthday, 6 months later from where I was, I get a call. He goes, John, you have to come get a call. You have to come to Love Light. Love Light was a club owned by Leroy Washington. So he's the DJ at Studio 54. He owns a club called Love Light that David Morales, who's a very big guy in the world, that was his first DJ gig. So he owns this place and he goes, the IRS is coming down. He's not paying taxes. We had to move all this stuff to Love Light. He goes, come with a car. So I get my friend Richie. I said, I felt bad leaving my mom. I'm like, I gotta run. 33rd Street on the West Side Highway. I get my friend Richie, worst driver in the world, but that's how desperate I was because I said he's gonna wind up hitting a bunch of shit on the way, but it'll be worth it if I can get there. I pull up, he opens up the garage door, and I go into a room. He says, take whatever you want. I said, what? And he goes, take whatever you want. So now he's got thousands, thousands of records. Now, Leroy, because he was at Studio 54 and so influential, he had ties to some other high-end people. Johnathan Fearing, big remixer guy. He had Johnathan Fearing's collection. Johnathan had done, you wouldn't notice, but a record called Jam On It and a lot of just influential electro disco, like crazy rare. And because he was an A-list guy, he also had access to crazy acetates. So I'm in this collection and I'm pulling girls just want to have fun, like just stuff. I can't even believe what I'm saying. I fill up like 3 crates and I go home and I said, I can't believe what I left. Because I didn't want to feel like, I don't know if you guys know in Italian, a gavone. A gavone is like, you don't want to stop. Like you just keep eating. You just don't want to be a gavone. So I don't want to be that guy. And I went home and I remember going through, Michael Sambello, Maniac, 4 test pressings. Just, I mean, I'm going, I just, my mind is just, but it was just, that was such a nice thing, the way that kind of went from me. And I gave him that turntable. I wasn't expecting anything. I just did that from the kindness of my heart. And I knew it meant something to him. And I think I've been blessed on the other side of that, where a lot of people kind of, not that I use the word term pay it forward, but I believe that's come back to me many times over the years, with people saying, hey, I know that this guy, told me you collect these things. Are you interested? I got a call. I was in the call with my kids 2 Christmases ago. I get a text from a guy. I have no idea who he is. He goes, hey, my name is whatever. I think it's some telemarketer. I'm not really paying attention to it. And he says, I know you collect acetate. So obviously you say acetate, and you just, I stop my tracks. So I say, yes, I do. He goes, I have this Shalimar record. So I'm saying to myself, I'm missing one Shalimar record right in the socket. Now, Shalimar's with Jody Watley. She was in that group. And like, I have other Shalimar acetates. So I'm like, this guy, he goes, yeah, right in the socket. I literally almost crashed the car. So I'm like, I'll be there. And I went to see this guy in Williamsburg, and I go into this like store, and all these new stores are like, nobody's in them. Everything's all neat. It's like, I don't know how they pay rent. but it's kind of a crazy thing. And I go into the guy, doesn't hit me over the head, gives me a good price on it. He goes, by the way, I have a couple of other acetates if you're interested. And he had a Prelude acetate of this, and I'm going to explain Prelude in depth. We're going to definitely do a show on Prelude, my favorite label of all time. So I wound up getting another record, which was great. But I still to this day don't know how this guy found me. I don't know who he was. Very bizarre.
It's
So
karma. It's karma. Good
yes,
things
yes,
happen. And,
yes,
one of the things you said that I could totally relate to is the kind of ambiance or home type atmosphere of a mom and pop store. It's so different than one of these corporate stores, and my first experience with record stores, I wasn't a record guy. So,
yes,
some of them you walk into, I always relate. I started off at Tower Records, and we would get a gift certificate every Christmas, and
yes,
go pick out one item, right? But it was tapes. For me, it wasn't records, and spend 2 hours in there trying to decide which tape to get, and
yes.
I mean, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. It's terrific, but you see, that was an example of a corporate store that was not very corporate, at least to me. It didn't seem, the guys they hired there
Yes.
were the last thing from corporate. And, we loved going to that store. And then in college, I encountered places like Rasputin's and Amoeba. And
Amoeba. I've been to Amoeba.
those places are fantastic and not corporate at all. And it seems to me like, the Vinyl Mania, the way you describe it, is very much a mom and pop store, small business where people can come and feel at home. But as an outsider walking into one of those stores the first time you've been there, or if you don't really know record stores, it could be a little intimidating.
Absolutely. And most people that I've found in all my years of collecting, most record people are assholes. I mean, it's like when you go to a record store, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie High Fidelity with John Cusack. It's one of my
Sure.
favorite movies. Well, if you look at how much of an asshole they were very condescending. Guy comes in, I want Stevie Wonder. Why do you want that? Like that's, but it's that was a real thing. Another thing about Charlie from Vinyl Mania, which I think, when he built Vinyl Mania and all of the places around it were starting to come into play, the difference with Charlie over every one of these people was his records were clean. Whenever you went into a secondhand shop, I don't care who it was, Amoeba, every one of these places, half of those records like they were run over by an 18-wheeler. They get them, they try to polish them, whatever. Those record cleaners don't do shit. At the end of the day, if your records are clean, they're clean. If they're not, they're not. My records are immaculate. I would not buy a record if it wasn't clean. And Vinyl Mania was probably the hands down only place that you can get secondhand. You didn't even have to pull them out of the sleeve. You didn't even have to do that. Whereas I remember going to Chicago, a place called Gramophone. Gramophone was like the big house music. All the big producers at the time were working there. Those records were hands down I've never seen condition. These were like people were throwing things, getting razor blades. I mean, I don't even know how it's possible you can do that kind of damage to vinyl. It was horrible.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you talked a little bit about the guys who helped you with your collection. Were there any competitors who were kind of like your nemesis in the acetate and test press space? You guys were.
I gotta tell you, I've always been a person that I always say, if there's a competition, like you come with a knife, I'm coming with a machine. Like I want to obliterate the competition, and I'm a good person, but the competition thing gets a little crazy. And I gotta tell you, when it comes to the test and the acetates, I was so far ahead. I'm still so far ahead. I don't, if you would ask me right now, who are the next three behind you? I couldn't even give you three. I know people, they're like, we have a couple of mutual friends overseas, but their stuff is it's very one category. It's a very, I mean, the fact that I could have an Aber acetate in, a Run DMC, I don't know anybody that's going to cover the bases at that level. But there were record people. I think one of the hardest parts I had as a record collector and being a good person, well, I think I'm a good person. I I wouldn't, if you were like, John, I'm really looking for, a sealed copy of Thriller, and if I find it and it's like $7, I wouldn't even charge you. I would just give it to you. But there are people that would get that and be like, yo, Terry, I just got this thing cost me $250. Like that exists. And then if they know that you, or if they think you have money, or they know you have something that they want, that's the worst thing in the world. So you're sitting on some poster or some comic. I have this record, and you're like, they know you don't want to part with that comic. Because with me, I don't like trading. I've traded very few times, and I lost sleep over those trades. That I would rather just sell them. The trade thing, it just does not work for me. And I've been people constantly, John, I'll give you. I'm like, no, I will not trade. I won't do it. The problem is, I there are records I'm looking for and I have been looking for that really aren't that valuable overall. To me, I could say they're worth whatever, but for whatever reason, if I can't find it with a certain label or a certain pressing of it, it becomes this piece. And when people, it's like they smell it. Oh, he needs that. Oh, yeah. Oh, I have one of my friends right now. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's got two records on the Prelude label. Not Prelude's like, it's my favorite. There's a guy named Marvin Schlachter. We're going to do a deep dive into, we could do 10 hours on Prelude, but I'm missing a couple, and this guy's got them. And I offered him this really rare, the 7-inch I showed you, the running, the information. That's $1,000 record, hands down. I showed you that. The everything on the information side. And he wouldn't do it, and he's a 7-inch guy. It doesn't really make sense. I'm saying to myself, these things don't mean that much to you. This I know you want. It doesn't really make any sense. And I'd be losing out on that deal, by the way. Sentimentally, I'd be fulfilled. But on a dollars and cents level, this guy would clearly be winning that race.
Yeah,
Because
it's
if he had
pretty.
to go to you and say, hey, Terry, I got these 3 records to sell, you could sell that running record in 2 minutes. The other 2 records, you'd be sitting there like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with these things.
It's a pretty tough pill to swallow when someone has leverage on you. They know you really want something,
You have to let it go.
and there's the Johnny D price because they know that you really want it, which is totally different than the value.
I'm sure you
Um,
go through it on the poster and the comic. I'm sure you, over the years, people know you're a player.
well, I'm more of a small time player, but I have clients who there is a special price for them when they want something, and they have to either suck it up and pay it because they do want it, or they can, take it personally and just walk away. But yeah, collecting's really strange like that. It teaches you a lot about human nature, and but I think you've got the right idea. I mean, when you do something nice for someone, even if it doesn't come back to you at some point, it kind of feels great to help them accomplish something that they've been trying to accomplish. But oftentimes I found it does come back to you in some way because people remember who helped them along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to think. Listen, that's my parents. That's my upbringing. My parents were saints. I mean, they were the greatest people on the planet, and they were never about money. And families would, start having meltdowns over property. They never got involved. They were not those people, and they instilled that in me. I mean, I was always driven by money and working, but I just always wanted to have things. And my father kind of passed that on to me because he was a crazy collector with things. But yeah, being a good person, the older you get, you really see that, Well, it's funny you mentioned that you help people and your help it comes back. I look back at my time in the music business, and I would help anyone. If you told me your cousin wants to do electrical work in the building I work at, I would get your cousin a meeting with the guy in charge of maintenance. That's the guy I was. Today, you ask somebody for something that they could easily facilitate, they won't even return the call. And that was pretty horrible to see that reality. And I've seen that even before COVID and everything. I saw people were just pretty hard, helped a lot of people over the years. There were people in the music business that literally would say, hey, John, I'm going to put you together with Terry. But whatever you guys do, I need to, be in the background. And I mean that, and I look at them, and I think they're joking. I'm like, what? I do this. I do this 20 times a day. I put people together.
Why do you think that is?
I just think people are just, I think some of it can come from, I think if you have a bad experience early on, I think you kind of you want to push it to the next level. You look at the Puff Daddy stuff, right? I worked with him. He was horrible person. But the thing about him is he supposedly early on was mistreated from Andre Harrell. So then you say to yourself, is that really the process? Is like, okay, I was treated like I have a friend of mine who his parents were divorced and you know, he wasn't treated yeah, he was treated horribly by the stepfather, but he had two sons and he's like the best father in the world. So, you could take control of your situation and either decide I'm not going to do this or I'm going to keep it going. If I sit back and just think all the people that burned me, I'd be the most miserable person on the planet. It's just like you
Sure.
could easily get caught up in that. That's very easy.
Yeah, lemons or lemonade. I mean, but I wanted to ask you about, these stores make up such an important part of every collector's journey, whether it's comic book stores, like I worked in a comic book store for a while, or a record store. Um, but the coming of eBay obviously changed things when it did. And the other day you mentioned how now you like to sit home and just hit the buy it now button. I have a very mixed relationship with eBay. On the one hand, it's definitely changed collecting in many ways for the better, and deserves a lot of respect for that. But there are also a lot of negative parts about it too. What's your experience been like on eBay? I mean, have you used it a lot for records? Have you had issues? Have you found great things?
Yeah, I've done really well on eBay. I was a little hesitant at first. I didn't, I was, being a mom and pop digging kind of a person. I was, buying online. How could you trust it? Is the picture right? Are they showing you a stock picture? You get a thing that's totally opposite. I've gotten burned. I've done well. It's gone back and forth. Being a person like doing what we did for years, that was the adventure was great. I told you I learned San Francisco walking from the water to Sanchez, just looking for record shops with the yellow pages. So that was exciting. Are you going to, you have no idea what you're going to do. Having said all of that, I am a person, I love the instant gratification. So the fact that I can go on, buy it now, right now, sign me up. If I could have done this instead of 1978, I probably would have been all in on that because I do love that.
Well, one of the interesting things about eBay is you see an auction go, and then it ends on a certain price, and you don't know who's watching the auction. Maybe it's a very watched one, where you could see there are a lot of followers, but it ends for a price. But someone like you watching an auction, there's like an asymmetry of information. I mean, you've been following this for 50 years and you know what's truly rare and what's not. And maybe some other guys, very new, and he sees an acetate. So let's say a piece goes for $1,500 and you win it. And
Yes.
and then someone comes along, a month later, oh, that record's worth $1,500. And you're like, if you wanted to win this record, you would have had to pay a lot more than that because it's I wasn't going to let anyone get this record.
Yes.
So it's a little misleading in that in terms of the comps, and there's lots of examples of that type of misleading nature, and the asymmetry of experiences. And the same thing happens in all collecting markets. I mean, the same thing happens in the Warhol market, or you see a piece on the dealer's website that you saw at auction and were following, and they've got a price tag on it, and your first reaction is, oh, I could have won that for so much less if I had bid on the auction. And the inevitable response is, no, you couldn't. You wouldn't have won it. You could have bid it up, but you weren't going to win it.
Yes.
Does that resonate at all?
Well, there are like 75 things I want to say. You know, yeah, by no means are those eBay end results even in the vicinity of the reality. And I mean that across the board. Forget about the big records. I just think in general, I was selling at one point on eBay. I was doing really well and I was working in Atlantic and I did a test one day and I said, I have a box of these. I think it was Genesis or Rush Test for Echoes. It was a promo CD. They only made a couple of hundred of these things. So I had a box of 30 of them. I said, I'm going to do an experiment. So I put one up for buy it now, 29.99. And then I put one up starting bid at 99 cents. The 99-cent auction style went to $63. Nobody touched the buy it now for two. Same exact listing. Like literally verbatim, same listing. I just said one buy it now, one auction style. So I go to the 63 guy, he gives me the money. I go do second chance offers for the 62, 61, 60, down to 58, whatever the hell it was. So I made a couple $100, and the one for $29 was still sitting there. Right there shows you that it makes no sense. Another thing about eBay that I've never heard anyone discuss, but I'm pretty sure this exists. I know it exists on Discogs. There are algorithms that eBay uses and Discogs uses that kind of doesn't put everything in everybody's marketplace. I don't know how they do this, but there are things I'm convinced when I won things, I'm like, there's no way that this was open to different parts of the world or the country, because how could this go for this price? And I've gotten phenomenal deals. Sometimes they've got me where I had to go a little higher. But overall, I think eBay is way, I just think, the whole auction thing to me, it's all luck. It's a horrible thing to be like, you're on vacation and you're looking for a comic that you're willing to spend $50,000 for. And then it's like, you're away on vacation, you have no access to a computer. You find out it went for like $2,000 and you're like, what? And that happens.
Yeah, eBay and Discogs and auctions is such a rich topic, and we will have I'm sure we'll have full episodes talking about that. I mean, there's so
Yes.
much information there. But you're right. I mean, I have bought items on eBay. I remember one in particular. I don't really want to, it's immaterial what it was, but there was an item for $6,000, or maybe they were asking 8,000, and I negotiated and made an offer and got it for $6,000. And the seller, I think he had 0 or 1 feedback. So I could see
I'd
a
be
lot of
afraid to
people.
buy from that. I'd be
Yeah.
afraid to buy from that person.
So I bought it, and knowing what I know in my experience of buying things, a lot of things, I was comfortable that I was protected, and I bought it. And I ended up immediately putting it in an auction. Not because I bought it to flip it. I actually really loved the piece. It just so happens sometimes last in, first out makes sense. I mean, you don't get attached to it. I hadn't even really unpacked it. And this woman from an auction house was in my apartment when I was unpacking it. And she was taking other stuff. And in a moment of weakness, I gave it to her because she really wanted it. It's one of the pieces I regret selling, but it immediately went to the auction house. And within 11 months of me buying it on eBay for like $6,000, it sold at auction for $140,000. And
Yes.
it was just sitting there on eBay with a buy it now that anyone could have bought it.
Yes.
But there's so many reasons why, it's not an accurate reflection. It doesn't always reach the right buyers. It doesn't get the right promotion. Maybe the seller doesn't have a high feedback number. Maybe it's just a day when, the deep-pocketed buyers are not on eBay. I'm not sure they're ever on eBay. I mean,
It's impossible to figure out. I bought an acetate of Star Wars. I think it was Return of the Jedi. I think I paid $35 for the thing. I'm not a Star Wars guy. It had a book inside of it, beautiful Alan Zant's acetate, definitely like one made crazy piece. Put it up for months on eBay for like 750, 500, dropped it to 350. Nothing, nobody cared. I put it on Discogs for $5,000. I sold it in a month.
that's great. That's
It's
great.
it's it's like how do you explain that? That makes no sense. That makes
Uh,
no sense. Absolutely no sense.
well, let me ask you this question here as we wind down this episode. If you had to rank the top 5 record stores in New York City in the 1980s, what would your list be?
Top five. All right, I'll do that. I'll say number 5 was Bondi's, which we had explained before with the imports and stuff. They were a key player. I would say J&R Music World, definitely 4. 3, I'm gonna say High Tech, even though they weren't, they didn't have as much traffic as the rest, but they were a very that was a very special place. Number two would be Downtown Records on Wirt Street. Downtown I moved like 5 times, but the Wirt Street location was the location. And number one, hands down, is Vinyl Mania. That's not even a question. And I'm sure people will, go through this list and have their own take on it, but I really can't see anybody debating the Vinyl Mania thing. Most stores modeled themselves after what Charlie did. Charlie was like the godfather of the 12 inches and stuff like that. And yeah, I would think most of those stores would mention Charlie Grappone, actually.
Well, that's terrific. I just want to thank everyone for joining us again and listening to these stories. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, thank you.